Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Matchday 3 Limitless draft. This video has been recorded after France vs Netherlands, so we get an understanding of most of the groups and how they're sort of progressing. Another thing I'll mention too is obviously two big teams are left to play. Before I've recorded this video, Belgium will play, but we do know that because they lost their first game, they definitely have something to fight for in Matchday 3. And then obviously with Portugal, that's a little bit of a different situation. I've taken the assumption that Portugal will probably beat Turkey. I might be wrong, of course, and we might change our draft because of it. But I'm expecting that with Portugal beating Turkey, that we're expecting less minutes for some Portuguese players, particularly Ronaldo, maybe players like Cancelo and Bruno, obviously, who are fit players who can definitely play Matchday 3 and start again. I just think that there might be an opportunity for them to be rested potentially as well, as I said. So my assumption here, as I said, is Portugal win, and that's sort of how we've created the draft here. I do think Bruno obviously has someone who always plays fixtures for most of his teams. I'm assuming that he can be available to play, but you'll notice, of course, that the replacement for Bruno is another premium. So with the Limitless draft, of course, we have an unlimited budget. That's the key point of Limitless. I've lined out the team in order of day of play, but quickly starting with the defense, we're going to go with DeMarco once again. I still think he's a tough game versus Croatia, but out of all the fullbacks in the tournament, I still think he's one of the better attacking ones, and I still like the punt of the sort of defensive fullback and what opportunities that can provide. So definitely still going to try my luck with DeMarco one more time. I don't think Italy's defense have actually been that bad within the tournament. If we're being honest, they were completely ransacked by Spain, but they actually still looked relatively strong. Donnarumma actually made a lot of great saves too, and I think overall we've seen their defense has been pretty good, bar the sort of one-off mistake with Albania. And obviously, I think that the Spanish fixture, you can take it off the table because really, I don't expect Croatia to be able to put that level of performance or that level of sort of tactical domination over Italy in a must-win game for here. Well, not really a must-win game for Italy, but a very crucial game for Italy. As far as Theo Hernandez, I just think brilliant fixture for France. They still have something to fight for. Really nice that they only got a draw versus Netherlands. It just means that probably less chances that they'll rotate. It's a position obviously lacking in depth for France, so I do think Theo Hernandez will play again, which is very nice in a game versus Poland, who unfortunately have been rather weak in the tournament from the defensive side of things. They definitely collapsed in the second half versus Austria, and I'm looking, of course, forward to potential Theo Hernandez attacking dividends once again. With Mittelstadt, I do think that the news on Germany is that they're likely going to not rotate. So if we get the German lineup, by the deadline, and we find out that Mittelstadt's part of the team, he's more than likely going to end up being the part of my team anyways. I think Mittelstadt's a very good pick. He continues to attack. He's been very attacking in both Matchday 1, Matchday 2. Definitely put a lot more crosses in let's say Matchday 1 in my opinion, but then actually obviously got the assist in Matchday 2, which is very nice. As far as Grimaldo, he's a new pick. I'm expecting as a Spaniard for Spain to rotate. I think Cucurella has played brilliantly within the tournament. I don't think Grimaldo is going to sort of take his position into the team, nothing like that. We've secured first within our group. I think this is a chance to rotate, and I think Ronaldo is the most interesting defender that I can pick from Spain, given that he'll have a lot of access to set pieces like free kicks, like corners, definitely from the left hand side at least, and that's why I like Ronaldo as a pick for match day 3. I also think, yes, of course, ball recoveries have been very important. I'm clearly going for fullbacks, but when you're going for Limitless, when you're going for that sort of that spectacular, I don't really mind some of these fullbacks. And we can see obviously with Cucurella, great example there where you can see a fullback can still get a lot of ball recoveries. In that same game, DeMarco also got 8 himself, so it's not, there are no guarantees really. On defense, as a starting goalkeeper, I will go with Pickford. I just think that clean sheet odds for England is strong once again. Much easier fixture compared to Denmark, compared to the previous game as well. So I do like that. And ultimately, I'm expecting for something from Slovenia, right? I think this is a good game to target triple England, even though they've been rather dull within the tournament. I still think that their picks are still very strong. And Pickford, of course, as a goalkeeper, just for the purpose of potentially locking in a clean sheet. Very happy with him as a pick. And then the backup keeper will be Diogo Costa for me. He just has another great fixture as well. I don't expect Portugal to rotate goalkeepers the same way that I do with Spain. With Spain, I think the very specific example that I've mentioned on Twitter is that I think that Unai Simon can definitely be rotated with David Raya because Unai Simon unfortunately has a wrist injury. I can't see the need to really play him for a game that might be, let's be honest, consequential for, Spain and their tournament, and the fitness of their players as well. So the last defender is going to be Virgil van Dijk. I think he has a lot of the intangibles, even though his fixture is very tough. Now this spot is probably the one that I'm a little bit shaky on, to be honest. Virgil van Dijk, obviously, as I said, has a tough fixture. It's Austria. Clean sheet odds aren't particularly great for the Netherlands, but I still like the sort of routes towards multiple sort of avenues of points that Virgil van Dijk has, right? When Depay is off the field, we tend to see that he takes much more set pieces. We also tend to see that he's one of the better corner threats, obviously, within the friendlies heading towards the tournament. You saw Van Dijk score twice in a row. That's very common, and that's just the standard Van Dijk set. So I do like Van Dijk as an option very much. Dumfries is interesting as well for the fullback logic, but I think out of all the center backs, the fact that he has more routes towards points is something that's very appealing for me. And obviously, whenever Virgil van Dijk plays well, and maybe the Dutch team do well, he's obviously got a decent amount of man of the match share as well, which I do like, to be honest. So Virgil van Dijk rounding off the defense. Some of the options that I didn't consider, for the purposes of this draft, but I still really, really like differentials, if you'd so say. I do quite like maybe doubling up on Spain because I think the fixture is quite nice, but I'm pretty sick of losing my clean sheet to Albania. So I do think some of the other options that we can think about are definitely a Portuguese defender. My issue, of course, is that with the Portuguese defense, I think it's very likely that they'll have progressed, and it's hard to sort of pick which Portuguese defender will sort of start the game and what the minutes will be like for the Portuguese players. So I'm a little bit less certain. Whereas I think with Spain, I think we're more comfortably going to rotate. So that's why I've lined up with these defenders as such. And I already have Douglas Costa as well, sort of backing up the Portuguese defense. So no need, in my opinion, to maybe double up on it. I could definitely go with another French defender as well, because I think they've been a very strong defense throughout the tournament. We talked about, before the tournament started, that potentially, of course, they were one of the defenses to look at. I think with Saliba coming into the team too, it seems like they look much more assured, to be honest, as a defense as well. So I think definitely a French defender is something to look at as a double up. In terms of the midfield, though, I will be going with Bellingham. Once again, slightly easier fixture compared to the previous game. I don't think he was as imposing necessarily within the second game in Matchday 2, but that's normal. It happens in football. I still think that he's one of the few players trying to do something. He was one of the few players who actually carried the ball for England and actually trying to drive at the opposing defense. So I do like Bellingham. I think his minutes are very good compared to particularly Foden and Saka, who are oftentimes going to be subbed off for other players within the team given the bench depth that England have. So I do like Bellingham a lot as an option. You can still continue to see him make these sort of late in the box runs, so I do really like Bellingham as a pick. Gundo, just for the intangibles, once again, really good sort of goal share, moving into the pockets all the time within the box. A lot of 1-2s, for example, were super close to Gundo scoring. He always makes runs into the box. So for example, whenever you see a cross, he's always in and around the box as well, and ultimately maybe a small amount of pen share, even though we expect that maybe Fulkrug or Havertz can take a fair bit of that as well. Oyarzabal is someone that I expect to be rotating for Spain. I think he will be sort of deputizing for Morata, in my opinion, as the center forward for this game. I think he will also have pen share as well, because with Rodri being suspended, we don't really have an out-and-out penalty taker for Spain. So Oyarzabal, I think when you go back to the penalty record, has a much better penalty record than anyone else within the Spanish national team. Joselu, for example, has a really bad record despite the amount of penalties he's taken. Now, obviously, he hasn't missed too many penalties in the last few years, but he's already missed 2 penalties this season for Real Madrid. Eriksen, for me, is a little bit of a toss-up between, I think there are a couple talismans, to be honest. I like Eriksen, I like Bruno, I like Sobo, and I like De Bruyne. In my opinion, I think De Bruyne is more than likely going to have an important match for Matchday 3. Bruno, his match for Matchday 3 probably is the best on paper. It's Georgia, and the goal share is going to be absolutely substantial. But I'm not really sure if Bruno will absolutely have to play that game. We saw, for example, even in the friendlies, yes, even though Bruno is the type of player who plays almost every game possible, if the game is inconsequential for Portugal, I just can't see why Bruno would necessarily need to play this game. To allow him for rest makes sense to me still. So I think I'd rather go with a player who actually has clearly something to play for and is looking for a victory. In Oyarzabal's case, I think at least I can make the argument that as a B team player, you're looking at someone who, of course, is playing out of position, but also clearly also wants to make sure that he can guarantee more minutes within the team so he can contribute. Whereas obviously with Bruno, it's effectively a bit of a dud game for him. So Bruno, from that aspect, isn't a part of my draft. I've also picked Eriksen over Sobo. I just think overall, I'm more impressed with Denmark overall. And even though Hungary technically have the easier fixture, I've just been less impressed with them, even though they put a much better performance versus Germany compared to the performance that they put out versus Switzerland first time round. So on that basis, I've picked Eriksen within my team, and I've also picked De Bruyne as well, rounding out the 5 midfielders within my draft. The reason why I've gone for Gundo as well, going back to it, over someone like Musiala, is I still think that the pen share is something nice to have, and I think it's a bit of a toss-up between the two of them. I think Gundo, as you can see, clearly can get man of the match as well. So can Musiala, who's been super effective in this tournament. I don't really think there's a wrong answer between the two of them. Just personal preference here. As far as, let's say, Kane, Mbappe, and Lukaku, my front line here, I mean, this has been a pretty boring front line that we've seen all tournament long. Mbappe, I think, has a little bit of doubts. And the reason why Ronaldo's not a part of this draft is because I think, once again, at his age, if Portugal, as I expect, to beat Turkey, or as I expect, should beat Turkey, I think he should be rested and therefore won't be a part of this draft. Mbappe, in my opinion, it's a bit of a weird situation where, of course, with Matchday 2, what we saw was that he didn't play at all. He sat on the bench, which was, I think, already something that we didn't expect. A lot of people thought he might not be a part of the squad. But I think, obviously, as a captain of the team, as someone who's important to the squad, he probably was always going to be a part of the sort of selection on the day, and obviously a part of the bench. So I can understand why Mbappe didn't play. I also think that, however, that increases the doubt of whether he plays in Matchday 3, because France's position within the group is already very strong. So I'm a little bit doubtful over whether Mbappe starts. And so if I'm doubtful that Mbappe starts, and if we get news from French outlets that Mbappe doesn't start, what I will most likely do is probably go for Antoine Griezmann. I think he had a lot of chances. Once again, you can see he was the clear talisman for the team when Mbappe was out. Got most of the goal scoring opportunities. I don't think he'll be as unclinical next time out, hopefully. But once again, with the amount of chances that he had, I think he's a great option to go for. So Mbappe is basically a placeholder for the French attacker. And that's how I'm planning to line up my selection. Kane, obviously, despite the early substitution, I'm still pretty confident in Kane as a pick, so nothing really to complain about there. Lukaku, in my opinion, obviously, is someone who you don't really need to argue for, because I think Matchday 3, clearly there's going to be something to fight for Belgium. I don't really see Lukaku, not being first choice in Matchday 3 either, so no sort of minutes concerns. I think the other forwards that might be interesting, of course, would be Ferran Torres, of course, if you want to just back up maybe triple Spain, who have actually looked like a very strong team within this tournament. But other than that, that's going to be my team selection, and hopefully nothing else will change after we watch the games tomorrow with Belgium and Portugal. But obviously, I'll give you guys a fully updated team selection around the deadline. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful time, and take care, and goodbye.